Okay, so we've all heard that promise, right? The internet as this single borderless world, this global village that connects every single one of us. But what if that whole picture is a myth? Let's take a closer look at the hidden walls and borders that are actually shaping our digital lives. Right, so let's start by really questioning that whole global village idea. Because when you dig into it, the digital world isn't some flat, open playing field. It's actually carved up by all these invisible borders and power structures that quietly decide who gets a seat at the table and who gets left behind. I mean, the initial promise was incredible, wasn't it? This brand new frontier for global connection, where information flows freely and everyone has an equal shot. But the reality we're living in? Well, it's a bit different. Our digital world today is defined by borders. Borders built by technology, by corporate monopolies, and by state policies. And they're creating entirely new kinds of inequality. And that brings us to a really powerful idea that helps make sense of this new landscape: digital colonialism. See, this isn't just about the classic digital divide of who has internet and who doesn't. It's about a much deeper imbalance of power that, well, it looks a lot like old colonial dynamics. Think about it like this. It's a modern kind of dependency. The absolute core building blocks of our digital world. We're talking the physical cables running under the ocean, the huge cloud data centers. They're overwhelmingly owned by just a handful of corporations in the global north. So the rest of the world is basically building its digital future on land that someone else owns. And this is not some abstract theory. Just look at India's cloud market. More than 60% of it is dominated by what some are calling the Indian cloud trinity. And yeah, they're 3 American companies. This isn't just about business competition. It's a huge concentration of control over an entire nation's data and digital backbone. You know, one researcher, Jay Sadowski, came up with the perfect phrase for this. He calls these tech giants the landlords of the internet. And that just nails it, doesn't it? They don't just offer you a service, they own the digital real estate. And everyone else is pretty much a tenant who has to play by their rules. So you might be wondering, how is this new empire actually maintained? Well, the tools have changed. Instead of ships and armies, control now comes through code, through algorithms, data flows, and legal rules that are designed in one part of the world and then just exported everywhere else. Artificial intelligence is a fantastic example. We hear all the time about how AI is this great equalizer, this amazing neutral tool, but it's not. Because it's being built on top of this already imbalanced global system, it often just ends up concentrating more wealth and innovation in the global north, basically reinforcing the very divides we thought it might solve. Let's make this super concrete. In Kenya, a lot of AI-driven credit scoring systems work by analyzing your digital transaction history. Okay, so what happens if you're a rural farmer who mostly deals in cash? Well, with a tiny digital footprint, the algorithm might flag you as high risk, or worse, not see you at all. And just like that, you're locked out of getting a loan or other financial services. And it's not just the code, it's the rules themselves. Take a landmark privacy law like Europe's GDPR. It was developed for a European context. But because the EU is such a massive market, GDPR basically becomes the global standard by default. This forces nations all over the global south to adopt a framework they had absolutely no say in creating. Okay, so this all might sound a bit bleak, but this story is definitely not just one of dependency. Across the global south, a really powerful movement is growing to reclaim something called digital sovereignty, which is basically the right for nations to control their own digital destinies. At a national level, you see countries taking real action. Nigeria and South Africa, for instance, have passed their own data protection laws, tailoring global standards to fit their own unique needs. But here's the massive challenge. How do you actually enforce your own national laws against some of the most powerful multinational corporations on the planet? And the fight is leveling up. It's happening at a regional level too. The African Union's digital transformation strategy is all about building shared infrastructure to reduce that dependency on outside forces. Over in Southeast Asia, ASEAN's digital master plan is trying to strike a balance between regional teamwork and national independence. It's all about building collective power. But this is where it gets really complicated, right? Because this whole push for sovereignty brings up a critical question. Pushing back against corporate control is one thing, but what happens when that power is instead used by states to increase surveillance or silence dissent? Are we just trading control by a corporation for control by an authoritarian government? And that tension, that exact dilemma, is what opens the door to what might be the most hopeful part of this whole story. The idea of a third way, an alternative to both corporate and state control, one that's built from the ground up by communities themselves. The alternative is all about cooperativism, and the idea is actually pretty simple, but it's also totally radical. What if communities owned and democratically governed their own digital infrastructure? What if we treated the internet like a public good, something managed by the very people who depend on it every single day? And listen, this isn't some pie-in-the-sky fantasy. It is happening right now. In Spain, there's Wi-Fi.net. It's this massive community-owned wireless network providing affordable internet. In rural South Africa, Zenzeleni Networks is helping communities literally build and run their own telecom services. And even in the US, the Detroit Community Technology Project empowers residents to build their own local networks. What these community-owned models really offer is a different path forward. They help us move beyond the purely profit-driven logic of big tech on one side, and the surveillance-heavy nature of state control on the other. Instead, they imagine a digital world that's actually built around what communities need. So, we'll end with this question. As we look to the future, the challenge isn't just about getting more people online. The real defining question, the one we all need to be asking, is this: who gets to design, who gets to own, and who gets to govern the internet of tomorrow?